Hey YouTube, it's your girl Yona Marie, and today I want to talk about what it means to have perfect pitch. Yona Marie music, create with me. So having perfect pitch is something that a lot of musicians wish they had, and some musicians have. A very few rare amount of musicians, according to my research, 4% or less musicians are blessed with perfect pitch, which is known as absolute pitch, which means that you are able to correctly identify a pitch at any time, any moment. You don't need an instrument for the pitch reference. You don't need the song for the pitch reference. It's embedded into your brain just because of how musically inclined you are. Now, this might not sound like a big deal outside of the music world, but for musicians all the way back to Mozart, Bach, the biggest ones, the most famous ones, especially in the classic music world, were said to have perfect pitch, which means they were able to make all of those masterpieces back in the day without the help of a piano. They could be in bed with nothing but a pencil and paper and they could make a masterpiece. Wouldn't need any music, wouldn't need any instrument, no musicians, wouldn't need a radio. Of course, they didn't have radio back then. But the point is, music was really ingrained in them. And there are a few artists out here today that are lucky enough to have perfect pitch. They say that Michael Jackson had perfect pitch, Whitney Houston had perfect pitch. Charlie Puth is somebody you can go on YouTube and check out his videos where he shows off his perfect pitch. He talks about how he used to scare people in choir with it back in his school days. Celine Dion is said to have perfect pitch. Frank Sinatra. Many big music celebrities are gifted with this rare music ability, but most of us fall into the range of not having it. And a lot of musicians like me have something called relative pitch. And what relative pitch means is that even though you may not be able to recall a pitch 100% accurately, you usually fall into the right range. So let's say you have an idea where middle C is. So if you hum it, you might be on a B, or you might be on a C sharp, or maybe a D. So you're usually within a half step or a whole step apart. That means you're relatively close enough to having perfect pitch. And a lot of musicians have this because they're around music a lot. Some of it is due to genetics, but they generally don't have perfect pitch. And then on the other opposite end of the scale, I want to talk about people who are tone deaf briefly too. Because being tone deaf is kind of like being the exact opposite of somebody who has perfect pitch. Tone deaf, also known as having amusia, is somebody who really just cannot hear pitches accurately at all. And it makes it really hard to be a singer, especially because it's like floating out in the sea and you don't know how to swim. But it's not impossible. And I want to talk about how you maybe shouldn't feel bad if you don't have perfect pitch, because I know a few people that actually have perfect pitch and it gets to them to the point where they may get a headache if they hear somebody singing flat, especially if they're listening to a choir, let's say, that's singing a cappella and they hear the pitch suddenly shifting a bit. Most people wouldn't be able to hear exactly what's going on, but for somebody who has perfect pitch in that audience, or even worse in the choir, they will be losing it. I'm talking about headaches, nausea, extreme irritation. Perfect pitch is great and all, but it can really grind your gears when you're hearing stuff that's wrong. And a lot of times in the music world, things are not perfect. A lot of singers, especially live, we put on performances where every note is not 100%. It's like you don't want to be a robot. Some wrong notes, some extra emotion that could take away from your pitch accuracy can actually do you some good. So there are people out there who want to be able to consume music live and be able to love the little bit of flaws, you know, hear a little bit of pitch variation and not sweat it at all, not even notice it. But some people who have perfect pitch aren't even able to enjoy like the simplest songs because they hear something that's like one semitone off and it just ruins the whole song. It breaks the whole mood for them. So don't feel bad if you don't have perfect pitch. It has its pros and its cons. But if you want to figure out where you fall, do you have perfect pitch? Do you have relative pitch? Do you have a decent pitch, or are you tone deaf? I'm going to give a couple examples of ways you can figure that out yourself. So the first thing you want to do is start just at the base, which is the easiest thing to do, and that is seeing if you're tone deaf or not. So you won't need to know any note names or anything. You'll just need to have a music instructor or a musically inclined friend with you and an instrument. So it could be a piano, an online piano, as long as the pitch is accurate, as long as the instrument is tuned. And what they'll do is play a note, it could be any note, and you'll just match the pitch. And by matching pitches mean you'll sing the exact same note as that piano or guitar or whatever. And those who don't have any type of relative or perfect pitch may have amusia, which is tone deafness. And you may find yourself singing something that doesn't actually match the pitch that is being presented to you. And the only way to check this, again, is to have a music teacher or a musically inclined friend with you. So most people, like 90% of people, will be able to pass this. They'll be able to pitch match, which is just, you know, mimicking the same pitch they hear on the instrument. So at that stage, you'll know whether or not you're tone deaf. The next step is to see if you have relative pitch or not. Now, relative pitches, again, is if you're falling within a few notes of the correct note. So get your friend to play a specific note, especially somebody who will be able to identify a note. For this stage, you'll need to have some basic note identification yourself. So let's say you would need to know notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, so that if they play G, they say, what note am I hitting? You'll be able to guess which one. But if you don't know music notes, it'll kind of be hard to do that. So for example, if somebody has relative pitch, or if somebody has perfect pitch, they'll be able to hear somebody play a G and then say, oh, that was a G or a G sharp or F sharp, somewhere around G. So at that point, you'll be able to tell if you have relative pitch or not. So then to do the final test to see if you have perfect pitch is to see how accurate you're able to identify a series of pitches. So they'll play a G, F sharp, A, C, and then somebody with actual perfect pitch will be able to identify those notes directly, just perfectly every time. Now, another way to test if you have relative pitch or perfect pitch without an instrument, and this is not as reliable, it's mostly reliable to see if you have relative pitch because it deals mostly with your memory. So just playing a song. Me and my friends used to do this all the time in college. We will test our relative pitch abilities and we'll just put our Spotify on shuffle, but before the song plays, we'll have to make sure that we're coming in on exactly the right note or somewhere close. Now, people who have relative pitch may be able to correctly guess a few songs in a row as if they have perfect pitch. But a person who has perfect pitch will be able to 100% every time hit the right note. So again, test this out with your friends to be you fall in terms of being musically inclined. And thank you for checking out my video. Check out my website, YonaMarieMusic.com, for more tips for all types of musicians. And I will see you next time.